This is John Malanka with The Sacred Plant, and I'm with our friend and cannabis expert, Dr. Dustin Sulak. Dustin, if you want to start, I know we're going to be talking about anxiety, the silent killers, anxiety, depression, and insomnia. So welcome, and if you can just share your background for our listeners, and then we'll get on topic with anxiety, depression, insomnia. So
You
welcome.
got it, John. Thank you. So I'm Dustin Sulak. I'm an osteopathic physician. I'm a general practitioner. And for the last 9 or so years, I've been working with medical cannabis. It wasn't necessarily my choice. I feel like cannabis chose me. I was in the right place at the right time in Maine. I opened a private practice, and I thought I'd be doing osteopathic manipulation, hypnotherapy, and other integrative healing arts. But I was the only doc in the state at that time that was really willing to certify patients. So I learned very quickly and got access to what thousands of patients were already doing with cannabis to treat themselves. I learned a lot from that. We opened up a testing lab. I developed healer.com, which is an online patient education resource. I've been traveling around the world collaborating with other experts in the field and teaching, learning. It's been a wild and incredible ride, and I could never imagine seeing the kind of clinical results that I'm seeing every day with cannabis. It's just incredible, impressive, really meaningful and rewarding for me in my work. So I have 2 practices in Maine, Falmouth and Manchester. With my colleagues, we together see around 8,000 patients that are using cannabis for medical purposes. And I'm teaching with a company called Cannabis Expertise, educating doctors. That's a high impact part of my mission and something that I really enjoy. And I'm really happy to have, looks like, over 180 people here tonight. I love sharing this information. So thank you, John, for the platform and opportunity to do so.
And we've done a lot together. Corinne and I have had United Patients Group for the last 8 years, and we've done conferences throughout the U.S., and you've spoken at a couple of them, so it's always an honor. And you and I will be down in Florida at an integrative oncology conference in the next couple of weeks too. So I look forward to seeing you face to face. Our last few meetings have been over video, so I'm excited to see you. Will you bring anybody else on your team, your wife or kids, or no?
Patients at a time. We'll see you there with Danielle, my wife.
I'll see you up there. And actually, I'll be emceeing that this year. I don't know if you know that.
I didn't. Great.
Excited to help Mary Lynn and see the team. And then so I'll be flying there, and then I'll jump on a plane 2 days later. And I guess you and I will fly together down to Florida. So,
and just for our listeners, that's Patients at a Time. That's in Jersey City. I don't know if you know the exact date, but it's a great conference. I go just about every year. A beautiful mix of researchers, clinicians, activists, patients. It's wonderful.
Yeah, and actually that was one of the very first medical conferences that Corinne and I attended and learned so much. So let's go to the first question here. So would cannabis be somehow helpful to reduce either the pain or to reduce the size of subcutaneous lymphomas in the fat disorder such as Derkham's disease? And so Dustin, if you want to take that away.
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm not aware of any evidence that cannabis can reduce the size of a lipoma. Lipoma is a type of...
Sorry, my apology.
That's okay. A lipoma is a type of tumor. It's a fatty tumor, and obviously there's a lot of preclinical evidence that cannabis helps with various tumor types, but I've never seen anything looking at lipoma in any of the research. Now, if lipomas get large enough, of course, they're painful because they press on other structures, and that could certainly be relieved by cannabis. I wouldn't be surprised if cannabis helped with lipomas. I mean, it does so many different things, but I haven't seen that in my practice or in the literature.
And it's funny, we always get that question: would cannabis help with this? Would cannabis help with that? And I'm a broken record when I say this, but I always say I don't want to sound like it's like a duct tape with 1,000,001 uses. But as we keep going on, it is helping so many different ailments and diseases, and it is a sacred plant. So here's one here: will THC and CBD combination cause a positive result in a drug urine test?
Yes, absolutely. If you're taking a tiny, tiny dose of it, that's below the threshold. But what they're typically looking for is either THC or some of the metabolites of THC. There's one in particular that persists for a long time in the body. That's the 9-carboxy THC. It's inactive, so it doesn't create any like high or medical effects, but it lasts for a long time in the urine. Another question I get a lot about drug testing is would like a topical THC or would a hemp-based CBD make those tests positive? The answer to those two is usually no. I think that a lot of the hemp CBD products are actually, they do contain significant amounts of THC, even though the label doesn't say so. So you have to be a little careful with that. And there was a paper that came out recently that didn't show any THC in the urine from people using topically. But I do think that if it was a very potent concentrated balm or something like that, and you applied it over a wide surface area, that could trigger a drug test.
What about say diabetic patients that do have sores on the feet, or anybody that has any cuts on their hands? Would it get into their bloodstream that way?
Well, the cannabinoids are pretty good at permeating the skin and getting into the bloodstream, whether there's an open sore or not. And so if there's a break in the skin, then they'd be more likely. Yeah, I think that you'd have to really use a lot topically for it to get to the level where it's detectable in the urine.
Gotcha. And I'm just going to go right down. We get so many questions that I feel bad when we don't reach them all. So I'm gonna do a few of these, and then
All
we'll
right,
get
let's
onto
do
a
it.
topic. It's quite fun. And so here's one that I know the answer on, and so I know where you're gonna probably go. Should you take all your medications when you start medical cannabis? So you want to talk about drug-to-drug interactions and
Yeah,
safety?
sure.
Safety first.
Sure. So the general answer is yes, especially if you start with a small dose of cannabis. I wouldn't discontinue any medications abruptly when starting cannabis. There are some interactions. Probably the most common would be Coumadin or warfarin, which is a blood thinner. There's lots of things that can interact with Coumadin, including vitamin K, which is found in leafy greens. And so most of the drug interactions with cannabis are based on the liver enzymes that metabolize these drugs. And so if you have the same enzyme that's being used for, say, cannabis and Coumadin, then that could be like a bottleneck or a traffic jam, and you could get higher levels of both drugs in the blood while they're waiting to be processed. And so like doctors tell people when they take Coumadin, eat the same amount of leafy greens every day. You don't want to eat a lot on one day and a few on another day, because those are basically, vitamin K is like an antidote to Coumadin. You want to have a consistent level. You get your blood checked, see how thin or thick it is, and then adjust the dose of Coumadin. The same exact would apply to cannabis. You basically want to find your dose of cannabis, keep it consistent every day, and then check your INR and have the Coumadin adjusted if needed. There's some other drug interactions. There's some anti-epileptic drugs. The clobazam or Onfi is the most common one. It can raise the levels of an active metabolite of Onfi. Valproic acid or Depakote can cause elevated liver enzymes in combination with cannabis. But these interactions, I'll tell you, they're really only seen in people that are taking a lot of cannabis. What do I mean by a lot? Like at least 50 milligrams a day. I never see an interaction below that. Another common category is statin drugs. So these are cholesterol drugs. I won't go on a tangent about how they're really helpful for some people, but really harmful for others. But especially if you're on the max dose of a statin, you want to be careful combining that with cannabis. Some people can take CoQ10 to mitigate some of those side effects. Some of the antifungals that end in azole interact with cannabis. Erythromycin does. And so those are all liver enzyme interactions. There's also some interactions that don't have to do with the liver, like anticholinergic drugs, for example. A lot of the antihistamines that can, on their own, cause dry mouth, and in some people cause agitation or anxiety, especially in the elderly. Combining those drugs with cannabis can make it more likely for someone to have an anxiety reaction. Benzodiazepines, like a Valium or Ativan, these drugs will have increased sedation when taken with cannabis typically. And then the opioid drugs feel more powerful when they're taken with cannabis, and may have a higher abuse liability. They may be more pleasurable or rewarding when taken with cannabis as well. So those are the big ones that are kind of common in the population for people to know about. Long answer, but important info to get out there.
And with that, a lot of patients, we work with a lot of neuropathy patients taking oxycodone. They're taking 5 or 6 a day and not feeling anything. And then they try medical cannabis for the first time and they're climbing the walls and they say, I'll never try medical cannabis again. So can you touch up on why a medical expert should be involved in regards to drug interactions for safety reasons?
Well, there's some drugs that you simply aren't safe to stop
Yeah,
abruptly. Even if you feel like the cannabis is replacing the utility of that drug, you still don't want to stop it. The benzodiazepine is a great example because, for example, opioid withdrawal, it's miserable. People
yeah,
don't like it, but it never kills anyone. Benzodiazepine withdrawal can cause seizures.
yeah,
And it can, in rare cases, can lead to lethal consequences. And so maybe the cannabis is taking care of the sleep disturbance or the anxiety or whatever reason you were taking that drug. You don't want to stop it abruptly. You want to stop it very slowly under supervision. In some of the seizure drugs, gabapentin, these are other good examples.
yeah. I'm just saying, be careful, not stop cold turkey, but just have some guidance with a medical professional who, like yourself, who knows medicine and uh, cannabis as a medicine. So
And this is really one of the benefits of cannabis because so many people come to cannabis with the goal of replacing pharmaceutical
yeah,
medications. They don't have to do the switch out. They
yeah,
can leave all the drugs in place, slowly add cannabis, and then slowly take the drugs away. And that's way better for patients. And including their doctor, as you said, is essential in that
yeah.
conversation.
So Misty Bear, who I was trying to get you on earlier, so maybe this is your question. I'd like to know more about the possible down regulation of the endocannabinoid and dopamine system. My 17-year-old is medicating with CBD for depression, anxiety, and suicide. It helps her a lot, but I'd like to know proper dosage and dangers. Thank you. And Misty Bear, I believe, is down here in Palos Verdes, California.
Okay. So CBD doesn't tend to downregulate the endocannabinoid system. It actually can do the opposite. It can upregulate it in a couple different ways. And this has been shown in one study that in people that really applies to your situation, Misty Bear, in people with psychotic disorders, schizophrenia. In the studies that have looked at the antipsychotic effects of CBD, you see very high doses, 200 milligrams per dose, maybe 6 to 8, or even 1,000 milligrams total per day. This is going to be cost prohibitive for most people, but those are the doses that you can see really good clinical results on in the trials. And in those trials, in one in particular, it showed that the endocannabinoid levels increased during the study time. And so I think that this isn't conclusive evidence, but there's a strong direction here that shows we can use CBD for some of the thought disorders and some of the mood disorders. I'd say there's not a lot of risk. If someone's already using a dose that helps with the symptoms, they're aware of what the side effects may be: loss of appetite, sleep disturbance, maybe some GI upset. But CBD is very well tolerated, even in these high doses. What probably concerns me the most is that this sounds like an unstable situation. And I love empowering people to take their health into their own hands and really treat what's going on here. But it also sounds like this particular case would require a team approach for someone that could be very dangerous to themselves.
Yeah, thank you for that. For that. And um, here's one that always comes up, and it's Jerry. And I don't know what state they're in, but it's I'm in a state where I can only legally obtain hemp CBD. Can I supplement essential oils to get some of the terpenes that cannabis CBD has, like myrcene, lemon from lemongrass, linalool, lavender, bergamot? Um, so
Yeah, great questions. I mean, with or without hemp-based CBD, essential oil medicine is really powerful, and I encourage you to learn that. And I think that many of the botanicals you mentioned, these are powerful medicines that are effective in tiny doses that you can just expose yourself to through the ambient air. Put it in a diffuser, and certainly if you apply it to the skin or put it in a capsule and take it, you're going to get a much higher dose. So I think that CBD goes well with that. As far as recreating an entourage effect, I don't know that that's the goal. We are a very complex system, right? We have so many rhythms and layers of our physiology and components of the cell. It's incredibly complex. It really makes sense if we're trying to shift patterns of physiology to nudge that system from many different nodes. It doesn't make sense to try to take one molecule and push it. It's not going to have a great effect changing the system. What we call monomolecular medicine has really given humanity a few great things, but in a large way has failed us. It's failed to treat and solve many of our problems because that's just not how complex systems work, where you can introduce a single molecule and expect a profound lasting change. So I encourage you to explore essential oils. I wouldn't necessarily think about it as recreating some type of cannabis. I would say CBD can be really helpful. It's typically alerting, for example. It can be helpful with pain. It can be helpful with anxiety. Maybe you want to use CBD to help with sleep as well. It would make sense to pair it with something like lavender, hops, other sedating herbs or essential oils to bring out or to add some of those benefits to it.
Thank you. And here's a follow-up on the CBD from another listener, and she's Francine from Quebec, Canada. So thank you, Francine. She's asking about, there's not enough CBD in one brand that's available to us that we use, and she goes, will there be an entourage effect? And this is a 20-to-1 CBD to THC.
Well, it's really hard to know what's in any of these products. There's a study on online CBD products from just within the last probably 4 months, and it found that about 45% of them were accurately labeled. So that means the rest aren't accurately labeled, and it's an industry that's growing really rapidly. I think there's a lot of good intentions. Labeling for potency is inaccurate, and I'm concerned, there's other concerns like contaminants and toxins and things like that. I know there's a lot of listeners that only have access to CBD. And I do want to explain something. I think it's important to have this information, even though it may not change your patterns of behavior. But CBD is not legal in the United States. It's a Schedule I substance, according to the Department of Justice. According to the FDA, it's not a nutritional supplement because it's under investigation as an experimental drug. That's Epidiolex from GW Pharmaceuticals. And so we have two major branches of the government that are saying this isn't legal. But yet nobody's getting busted for it. At worst, the FDA is slapping some wrists of companies that are making health claims. And I see the industry growing. I think least of all the consumer is at risk. But for clinicians, for example, that are watching this, you don't want to sell CBD in your office. That's a Schedule I substance. I don't think the DEA would appreciate you doing that with one of their licenses. So CBD is a very good medicine. It's powerful. It's effective. It's certainly weaker milligram for milligram than, say, THC. And when someone's using only CBD, sometimes they need to use a pretty high dose of it, meaning like double or triple digits number of milligrams to see good results. And in those cases, it starts getting expensive. When you combine CBD with THC, which is really how nature presented it to us, that's where it really shines, because the CBD mitigates the side effects of the THC and it enhances the benefits.
You're the expert. I love listening to you. I remember we did a conference up in Northern California one year, and it was my mom and aunt, and some of her girlfriends were in the front row, and my aunt, and I've shared this story with you before, my aunt, you come on stage and she's thinking, what is this young guy going to teach me? And at the end, she fell in love with you. She's like, oh my God, he was wonderful. She still talks about you today. So I'll give my Aunt Lois a shout out for you, Dustin. So I have quite a few people that want to come live. So if you raise your hand, I'm going to try to get you to do this right. So we're going to, okay, here we go. Amber, and I don't know where you're from, but Amber, any use for bone health?
Bone health. So CBD has been shown to speed bone healing in rats that had a femur fracture. I think that that speaks to some of its ability. And then also the endocannabinoid system is intimately involved in bone health, whether you're using cannabis or not. Basically, we have osteoblasts that build bone. This is a cell type. And then osteoclasts that break down bone. And it's really important to have both functioning. A lot of people think of their bones as like some type of stone or inanimate object in their body, but bones are alive. They are living, flexible, full of blood, always changing and remodeling based on the force factors that they're exposed to. And so these two cell types that are processing, part of this remodeling process, they're controlled by endocannabinoids. And so stimulating the CB2 receptor tends to decrease osteoclast activity. This would decrease bone destruction and increase osteoblast activity, which increases bone building. What hits the CB2 receptor? Well, THC does. Also, beta-caryophyllene, which is one of the terpenes, is a selective CB2 agonist or stimulator, and that's found in some of the types of cannabis that may have a more spicy aroma, and you can find it elsewhere in the plant kingdom, like in black pepper. So that's the answer to bone health. I'm not aware of any studies where cannabis users or cannabis has been used for things like osteoporosis, but there's certainly a theoretic basis for that.
Thank you. And that, well, I'm trying to get someone live to, if you see on screen, I'm going to go to the next question here. This is from Sunny. Has cannabis been used for TBI, traumatic brain injury, for blast victims with beneficial results?
So cannabis has been used in animal models that are experimental of basically every type of brain injury. It could be a traumatic brain injury, ischemic, which means lack of blood supply, chemical damage to the brain, and so forth. And the endocannabinoids, the phytocannabinoids, meaning from the plant, and the synthetic cannabinoids invariably have shown benefit. Basically, they prevent the damage and destruction, and they speed the healing and prevent the short and long-term loss of function. Now, there was a study that came out a few years ago that looked at people that had traumatic brain injury that were admitted to a hospital. I think there were 400 or so folks in the study with traumatic brain injury, and they separated them into two groups. One is people with, should I stop? Keep going?
Keep going.
Okay, so one is people with cannabis positive, I think it was blood or urine, and cannabis negative blood or urine. And when they look at these two groups, what they found was that if you didn't have cannabis, you were about 11% likely to die. And if you did have cannabis, about 2% likely to die. So there seems to be an association with a protective effect or more survival, better results after traumatic brain injury, simply when cannabis is present in the system. Now, we're not talking about administering cannabis directly after the injury. In my opinion, that would be incredible. That's what we do in the animal studies, and it seems to work really well. There's also studies that have been looking at perinatal brain injury, that's lack of oxygen during birth, which can damage the brain, of course, have lifelong morbidity. And CBD is being investigated for that, and there's some really promising results. Now, since that traumatic brain injury, there's been two other studies that have looked at brain bleeds, different types of brain bleeds, and they found the exact same results. People who use cannabis who get a brain bleed, less likely to die, less likely to have permanent impairment compared to people that don't use cannabis.
Amen. And guess what I've done since you were talking? I
You
have
fixed it?
our first listener. Hi, Patty. You're on live.
I can't believe it. Hi.
It took me a while, so all the other people that raised their hand and I knocked them off, my apologies. So, hi, Patty. Where are you calling in from?
Well, right now I'm in Western Massachusetts. But
Okay.
I'm in New York and Massachusetts, so I do have access.
Closer to Dustin than you are to me. So, what questions do you have for Dustin Sulak?
Well, a couple of things. I've been trying for sleep. I can only get formulations like 20-1, and that seems to be working for sleep. But what I'm wondering is about for depression, for anxiety, and for cognition issues, short-term memory, what the best formulation is for that. What terpenes, would work. I can't seem to get that kind of information.
Well, yeah, that's a great question, and let me just clarify. Do you have access to THC, or are you talking more of a CBD dominant marketplace?
Both. For
Okay.
sleep, like 20-1, 20 THC to 1.
I see, 20-1. Usually I put the CBD number first, but I don't know that we have an industry standard for that yet. So, right, most people who are successful using cannabis for sleep use THC, and they use a THC dominant preparation that contains some of the more sedating terpenes. Most well known would be linalool, which is similar to lavender, and myrcene, which is found in hops. linalool is found in lavender, not similar to lavender. But these are muscle relaxants and sedatives, and so that's best for sleep for most patients. Now, CBD has been shown to improve sleep in some people, and which is somewhat of a paradox because it's almost always reported as being alerting, awakening, procognitive. And so this kind of, I'm going to answer your first and second question in one here. Some people can use doses of CBD before bed. They say they feel awake. They lay down, they close their eyes, they fall asleep, no problem, even better. Why? Because they're not anxious, they're not in pain. All the problems that were disrupting sleep can be addressed with the CBD, even though it seems to be alerting. But for daytime use, typically something that's more CBD dominant, it'll have this more procognitive focusing effect, and the terpenes that are typically best for memory and for mood and uplifting, pinene is a good one, like found in pine needles, alpha and beta pinene. Walk through a pine forest and inhale those aromas, and you probably feel really clear-headed afterwards for many reasons, not just the terpenes. And limonene, found in citrus fruit, that has antidepressant qualities. That's a nice one for daytime, for positive mood. So just to really keep things simple, that's what I would suggest to someone that wanted to kind of strike that balance between something sedating for night and something that's more stimulating, alerting, and non-impairing for the day. Was that helpful?
It is helpful. Just one question. I used a 20-to-1, a higher CBD, the 1 THC for daytime and cognition, and it doesn't seem like it does anything. And I can't seem to find out what terpenes are in them. They just say, it's 20-to-1 formulation.
Yep. So
it sounds like a hemp product, right, Dustin?
Well, whether it's hemp or whether it comes from a dispensary, the thing with CBD that a lot of people don't expect is that almost everyone needs a lot more of it than they need the THC. So, for example, your bedtime dose of THC may be 3 milligrams, 5 milligrams, 10 milligrams, somewhere in that range. For someone to really feel CBD, they may need 2 to 10 times that dose in terms of number of milligrams. Now, that's not everyone. I've had people tell me they took 3 milligrams of CBD and actually felt something. But milligram for milligram, you got to expect for most people, CBD is going to feel a lot weaker.
Okay.
And Pat and Justin, can you talk about formulations of what number goes what first? I mean, so Patty, so the way Corinne and I always had it when we first started with the father-in-law 4-to-1 ratio to us was 4 parts THC, 1 part CBD. And since the industry has changed or grown, I should say, a lot of times when you hear a 4-to-1 ratio, now they're connecting that with 4 parts CBD to THC, but there's still a lot of confusion. So Patty, I'm with you, but I think everyone out there who's listening, always ask, because you don't want to.
Yes. You
don't want to go. I'm so used to a 4-to-1 ratio, and next thing you know, of CBD to THC, and you try a product thinking it's 4-to-1, and now you've blasted yourself with 4 parts THC.
It's a great point, John. Thank you. And hopefully when you ask, the answer will be right, because I've had instances where there's been confusion in the labeling process and you end up with the wrong thing on the label. So I tend to lead with the CBD to THC. I've seen it that way in the scientific literature, and so I kind of picked that up and ran with it. But I don't think there's an industry standard or right answer currently.
Thank you, Patty. Have a great evening. Bye-bye. Thanks, Dustin, for that. Here's a question here. Can CBD oil spray help with Hashimoto autoimmune thyroid disease? And can it help with the joint pain? Can it help with joint pain and feel very lethargic and have a very lethargic feeling? And then 2, I'll just go back to pack. Is CBD okay with levothyroxine generic for Synthroid?
Yep, great questions. So I don't know that there's any evidence that CBD directly can help with any type of autoimmune thyroid disease. It's an anti-inflammatory and an immune modulator, and it does help with some other autoimmune conditions. So there's definitely a theoretic basis for that. It would be safe to try. Would not interact, as far as I know, with levothyroxine. So it's safe to try. And then the question is, does it help with the symptoms? I think that's the most important outcome that you're looking for. Whether or not it cures the disease, it can definitely help with the symptoms: muscle and joint pain, feelings of fatigue. Absolutely. There's a lot more to thyroid healing than a lot of people realize, than a lot of endocrinologists realize. I encourage you to dig into some of the books and literature that's out there about things like iodine supplementation for thyroid disease. I use that with my patients. And cannabis can help with a lot of things, but there's some other great natural remedies too, including several that are found on the periodic table.
Perfect. Thank you. And I'm going to try to get the next listener up here. And I have so many. That's why while you're speaking, Dustin, we have 284 people raising their hand. We have and I have a billion more questions. So I'm trying to get everybody up here. So I am listening to you if you.
Oh yeah, I know you're multitasking, and that's great. We're still connected.
Cut stride there. I am listening to you. So let me see. So Christy, I'm trying to get you on, Christy, but it doesn't look like you have a video camera. So if you don't have a video camera, I can't put you on. I can't put you on the screen with Dustin. So it'll have to be with a written in question. So let me pull this here. Let me see if I can get another one here. And there you go. Are you Leave? Unmute. So there you are. Hi, Leave.
Hey,
How are you doing?
I'm good.
Where are you calling it from?
Exciting to listen to all of this. Thank you.
Where's that accent from?
I'm actually from Belgium, but
I lived in Ghent. I lived in Ghent for quite some time.
But I'm in the Bahamas, actually.
Well, and what part of Belgium are you from?
Antwerp.
Antwerp. Yeah, I lived in Ghent. I know. I'm not. I know. I'm saying it wrong, but I'm an American, so it's you have a beautiful country.
Thank you.
So, what question do you have for Dustin Sulak?
I was actually listening to the previous lady as well because I have adrenal fatigue, and which causes insomnia, and I was just been actually my doctor just gave me a month ago the BDC oil to try it, and I said sure, why not, right? And didn't know really much about it, so I tried it in the first 2 nights. It really worked, but then I guess my body adapted to it, and I do feel good on it. But yeah, I guess I've been having insomnia for like over 20 years now, and I'm trying to work at it as good as I can and to do everything. I take a lot of supplements, natural, stay away from medication, and just try to learn more about, which if I should pursue maybe the oil or go to THC. But
yeah, great question. So CBD is so available, and it can help with sleep disorders, but it is not cannabis's strong point when it comes to sleep. THC is, and THC in the right context, meaning from one of these strains that's just sedating. I mean, that Mother Nature has given us, that with the help of breeders, some cannabis plants that are THC dominant that are incredibly good for sleep. And so from the cannabis world, that's where I would start. Now, but you bring up another interesting point. You had 2 good nights, and then you lost efficacy. And this is something that we see sometimes in cannabis medicine with THC or CBD. And you come to this interesting crossroads. It doesn't make sense. A lot of people would think that the next logical step is to try a higher dose of CBD. And that certainly may work. I wonder if that would work for you. I've
tried it last night, actually.
Okay.
I said because I'm a person, I don't just like, I'm careful as well, and I like to give it, and sometimes I have days that I sleep very well, and all of a sudden I fall into a cycle, and then I get out of it and I sleep amazing, and then I get into a very bad cycle for 4 days or something. But it's literally, I have too much cortisol as well.
Too much or not enough? You have too much at night, and I said too much or not
Exactly.
enough.
Too
Too
much
much
at
at
night.
night,
See, I'm
not
wide
enough
awake
during the
right
day.
now.
Yes, and so right. Well, here we are together. So, yeah, this is interesting. What I was going to say is that you could also perhaps get more benefits from lowering the dose. And this is the really bizarre thing about cannabis is sometimes when you lose efficacy, you got these two choices. And it can be kind of a roll of the dice, but with enough history, you may be able to get an idea of whether someone should go up or go down. But very often, I decrease the dose and regain efficacy after it's lost. Now,
Yes.
I also want to talk about how the cannabinoids affect the adrenals because there's a direct effect there. And typically, people that use THC have a blunted cortisol effect. In general, THC, the endocannabinoids, anything that's stimulating CB1 and CB2 receptor has this effect where it's basically telling whatever it's talking to in the body, okay, that's enough. Don't slow that down. Stop that a little bit right now. The same exact thing for the autonomic influence on the adrenal gland. So this would be the sympathetic nervous system that stimulates the adrenal medulla to produce adrenaline. So you can get
Yes.
lower levels of adrenaline. And same with the adrenal cortex, where we have hormones that are telling that aspect of the adrenal gland to release cortisol. Same thing, blunted cortisol response in people that are regular THC users. So this might be really useful for you in the evening, right? Because
Yes.
you want to decrease your cortisol. I'm not aware that CBD would have that effect directly. It could indirectly have that effect by raising endocannabinoid levels, but it would be a more modest effect than THC, which is acting directly upon these receptors. So I
Right.
think, I think that you're probably kind of answering your own question. It sounds like you know what direction is next. It sounds to me like someone in your situation would benefit from the right type of THC preparation in the evening and would probably love the way CBD feels during the day because it can be energizing, awakening, it can help get you going. And it
Okay.
sounds like you're in good hands and probably using some other strategies to help your adrenals, probably increasing your salt intake, and there's various supplements that can help do that. And it's not just
Yeah.
about what you put in your mouth, right? It's about how integrated your mind and body are, because so much of that you can control with some
Yeah.
practice.
Yeah, I do. Like, for example,
Sorry, I was going to
sorry.
interject. Being
No, like you were saying with going outside, go for a walk. It gives you the natural endorphins, make you calmer. All these little things together help.
Yes, I'm going to interject here. Is beautiful country is Belgium. They have. I drank the most coffee there, so I have to ask you, how much coffee and chocolate are you eating before bed?
I can't have coffee because it gives me heart palpitations.
Yeah.
But I do eat dark chocolate every day, a little piece.
You're Belgium, you have to.
I have to.
So would that affect your sleep, Dustin?
Oh, there's
I tried.
yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Oh no, you go ahead. You answer. It's your sleep.
No, I said I try to stay away from sugar, and But sorry, it's a bit of a bad sound, so I thought the question was directed towards me, but sorry, I don't want to.
Well, yeah, could a little dark chocolate affect sleep? Typically not. If someone's ultra sensitive to caffeine, maybe, but it sounds like you are sensitive to caffeine, and a small amount of dark chocolate isn't gonna have a negative impact.
Yes, but thank you very much. I mean, it's kind of exciting to talk to you.
Yeah.
And well, I'm not in Belgium. I'm actually in the Bahamas.
Yeah,
so
I know.
Have a lot of good weather.
Yeah.
Sounds great. Hope to see you soon there.
Yes.
The colors are very therapeutic here.
Send us a postcard.
Yes, I'll prescribe floating in the ocean for adrenal fatigue. That's really healing.
Yeah, I do that.
Okay, great. Yeah, in Chinese medicine, the kidneys and the adrenals embody the water element. Laying on your back on the ground, floating in water would be very healing to those as well.
Yeah.
See, isn't that wonderful?
Thank you very much.
You're on vacation, or do you live down there part-time? If you were...
I live there. I work here. I live here. I moved here 29 years ago.
Oh, because of the weather?
Yeah, I hate the weather in Belgium.
Believe me.
I hate the weather in Belgium.
You'd be there in the middle of July, and it would just be a torrential downpour, and I'd call my family here in the States, and I could hear the birds chirping, and they'd say, "What's wrong?" I said, "I miss the weather. I miss the weather." So, Liv, I thank you very, very much for your support and following us, and
thank you too.
Good to see you, and I love technology too. So putting us all together. So thank you, Dustin, for helping Liv as well.
Thank you, Dustin. Yeah.
You're
Bye.
welcome.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Pretty cool, huh? You know, connecting the world. And so,
Love it.
yeah. So let me see what else here. Actually, this Robert has written in a couple times. Are either of you responding to the current FDA request for feedback and insight into the value of medical cannabis that they'll be passing along to the World Health Organization? The deadline for submission is coming up soon, April 23rd. If so, please comment on what you intend to tell the FDA. Thank you very much, Robert.
Oh yeah, thank you for bringing the awareness of that to our listeners, because anyone can comment, and I
Yeah.
think that that's great. As part of the Society of Cannabis Clinicians, I'm on their board of directors. We're going to make a comment as a professional society, and I'll probably make a comment myself. And you know, I haven't really thought about strategy or what would be the highest impact information to convey. You know, I obviously want to keep it concise and to the point, and offer something that's useful. I think that the National Academies of Sciences report from last year is conservative, but also really informative. So this is a 440-page report. You can find it free online, funded by our federal government. It's a summary of the evidence, and it states that there's clear evidence, conclusive evidence, that cannabis is effective as a treatment for chronic pain, for multiple sclerosis spasticity, for nausea and vomiting, moderate evidence for sleep disturbances associated with a number of conditions. And I think that this conclusive and moderate evidence category just instantly validates that cannabis is a safe and effective medicine according to our federal government's scientific body. And that should be informative, I think. So number one point, this is a medicine, and it can be used as a medicine safely and effectively by patients. I'm not sure what other main points I need, but thank you. And if you want to use the chat feature to make some suggestions of what you think would be the high impact points to make, I'd be happy to read those.
Thank you for that. And Kat has written here a couple times, and this is, I'm going to give you a pat in the back, and it says, thank you both so much for your work. So thank you, Kat, and I received a couple of your messages here. So we appreciate those as well. Here's one that is, her name's Karen, and I really had a bad experience smoking pot when I was in my late teens. I passed out. I'm now in my 50s and had a head injury from falling and hitting my head, which has caused neurological issues with balance as well as equilibrium issues. I'm super sensitive, but have depression, anxiety, and sleep issues, which is our topic actually. How do I start out with small doses? Thank you very much, Karen.
Great question. So on healer.com, we have programs for people that are brand new to cannabis. You're not brand new to it, but you might as well be. It's been so long since you used it. The short answer is you started an extremely low dose. For you, with a history of cannabis sensitivity and maybe some cardiovascular exaggerated response to the cannabis, then I would say a low dose would be 0.5 milligram of THC. It sounds crazy, but that's where you would start. My goal for you, if you were my patient in Maine, would be to start subtherapeutic. I'd want your first dose to do nothing for you. And then we'd very gradually work up on your dose until you feel the bare minimum. Now, some people ask, how do I know if I feel the bare minimum? Well, this would be something called the inner inventory that I designed to know if you're experiencing cannabis or some other good feeling or not. I'm going to just introduce everyone to it because I like doing it. It feels good. So here's the inner inventory. It might take you 30 seconds. We're going to rate on a scale from 1 to 10. The first question is, how smooth and easy is it for you to take a deep breath?
And everyone do it right now. I'm doing it.
Oh man, you're just putting me at ease, John. I'm an 8 right now on my breath, and so 8 means very smooth and easy. And the next question is body. So it goes breath, body, and mood. For body is on a scale from 1 to 10. How comfortable are you to remain still right now? Just wherever you're sitting or standing, remain still for a few seconds. And I'm about a 6 right now. I kind of feel like getting moving, to be honest. I've been sitting a lot today. And the last question is mood. So put on a smile. How authentic is that smile? Or how genuine can you feel content right now? Yeah, I'm up there. I'm at 8 on the smile as well. So that's what you do. And what I would recommend for someone in this situation, any situation when they're trying to find out did a dose of cannabis work, you could check your inner inventory, rate your scores. And then you could take your 0.5 milligram of cannabis. You could weigh 40, and I think a liquid extract is a great way for you to start because you can use an oral syringe or you can use a dropper to get really precision dosing. And then I would encourage you to wait 45 minutes, maybe a half hour, but typically 45, and then recheck your inner inventory. If you've noticed that there's a change, then that dose of cannabis has done something for you. A lot of people, especially people like you that have been sensitive to THC, they're expecting a lot, right? And you really don't have to have this consciousness shift to achieve things like pain control or improvement in your neurologic function. That's totally not necessary. There's always a window between the dose that gives you therapeutic effects and the dose that gives you side effects. Now, for someone that's ultra THC sensitive like you, that's probably 3 to 5% of my patient population, maybe 2%. It's a narrow window because you're so sensitive to THC. So you need a strategy either to make that window wider. That primary strategy is to use CBD. Secondary strategy is if you only have THC, to follow the healer program, because basically once you experience a dose that's changing your inner inventory, I like people to stay there for 3 days. During those 3 days, the window starts getting wider. And then after those 3 days, you can start to increase your dose again, and you're going to have a lot easier time getting success without side effects. CBD can widen the therapeutic window, and you can make the window seem wider just by having precision control of your THC dose. If you can titrate by 0.5 milligram increments, it's very likely you're going to find something that works for you that isn't causing side effects. For someone in your situation, I always recommend avoiding inhalation. It creates a very high blood level of THC that can change the autonomic nervous system, dilate the blood vessels, lower the blood pressure, raise the heart rate, cause things that might make someone pass out if they're really sensitive. And so there's no reason for inhalation unless I were to find out more about your medical history. I really wouldn't recommend that.
Thank you for that one. And speaking about medical history, that my team has been writing me for the last hour. Disclaimer, 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 and I've been just going on with you. So the disclaimer is that this is for, we're not doing any medical guidance. This is for informational purposes only. So
thank you, John. Yeah, I'm not, I can't practice medicine outside of Maine. I'm not licensed to. I'm telling you about some of the information we have on healer.com and some of the other educational resources. And this is what I would do if you were a patient that came into me in Maine, not knowing your whole medical history, your medication list. I can't make very specific recommendations, and I don't want to.
Correct. Thank you for that. Here's a message here from a listener in Malibu, California, Amelia. And actually, I sent her to Dr. Frankel the other day, and she has autism. And she says, I just want to thank you very much. I'm calmer, and my eyes are blinking less. And she's been taking CBD for 2 days. And so, Amelia, thank you for listening, and touches my heart to hear that. So thank you for sharing that. So we're going to bring on Melanie. Let me see a live one. Let me see if I did that correctly. Excuse me here, Melanie. Yep, there you are. 1 second. So Melanie, and let me see if you have a camera live here. So I need your permission for the video. So Melanie, if you want to turn your video camera on, I'll get you on live if you're there. So she said Miss Melanie will start her camera later. So sorry, Dustin, 1 second here.
No problem.
And we have Alicia. Let me see, Alicia, and can you start your camera, Alicia? So I'll go on another camera, another question here, and then we'll see if we can get Alicia to get her. So this is from Sarah. What is the current research regarding the efficacy of either CBD? Oh, I'm going to go right to Alicia there. Hi, Alicia.
Hi, can you see me?
I can see you loud and clear. And so thank you. How are you doing?
I'm great. How are you?
Good. Where are you calling in from?
From Colorado.
Beautiful Colorado. Is it snowy there?
No, it's nice and pretty. About 68 degrees today. Windy.
Ooh, Nice.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be flying through there next week, so sometimes it scares me in the middle of the winter when you get delayed due to snowstorms. So, Alicia, you're live with Dr. Dustin Sulak, and what questions do you have?
So currently I'm taking a cannabis-derived CBD that's 28 to 1.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's okay for the daytime. However, I have serious insomnia. And I don't know if it's safe to use some THC in the evening or sleep or not, or if the 28 to 1 THC is enough. I'm not sure. But the 28% is the CBD, cannabis derived, and then the 1% is the THC. Would it be safe, you think, for me to use a THC in the evening time to go along with that?
Yeah, so
For
I
sleep?
mean, I can't say exactly what would be safe and what wouldn't be safe for you, but I'll tell you, for most of my patients that have great success using cannabis to treat serious sleep disruptions, it's THC that's the heavy hitter there. And so if you've tried CBD, I mean, for people like we talked about earlier, if that's all they have access to, sometimes really cranking up the dose of CBD, say to the 50, 100, 200 milligram range is helpful with sleep. But you might be able to get results with 2 milligrams, 5 milligrams of THC for sleep. Certainly below 15 milligrams works for most people. And so you can see some of the programs on healer.com for how to titrate your dose up slowly. But that's really the part of cannabis that tends to be the most helpful with sleep. And it is quite safe for most people.
Okay. And then my next question is also, I'm also dealing with a cancer too that I'm clearing from my body. And I did buy some Phoenix Tears here in Colorado, probably about 6 months ago, and started using that as a suppository because I didn't want the high. And I never felt anything, and I don't know if it's working. And I don't know if that's too much THC, but it never helped me sleep. So I don't know if it's working or not. So I stopped. And I don't know if I should start back with the suppository or just leave that Phoenix Tears alone for a while. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, great question. So to begin with, for the rest of the listeners, my assumption, what I know of Phoenix Tears, is that it's an extremely potent cannabis concentrate, like a hash oil. And it's typically THC dominant, up 50% or greater THC by weight. So something as small as a rice grain could have 50 milligrams of THC in it. I mean, it's really a potent medicine. So to begin with, I don't recommend that for people to start out with. I think you would do much better with a THC oil that's dilute, say 20 milligrams per milliliter, and you can start with 1 drop, go up to 2 drops. That's just so much easier to work with. And you can certainly take that Phoenix Tears, like any cannabis concentrate could be added to a carrier oil like olive oil or MCT oil. It's hard to get it to dissolve. The easiest way is with something called a magnetic stir plate, which you can get for 10 or 15 bucks. It's basically, you put a jar or a beaker with the oil and the cannabis concentrate, and a little magnet goes around while it's warmed up, and it gets it to dissolve. So that would be, I'd be much more comfortable with you doing that. But your question about rectal absorption is really huge, and I would like to address this for our listeners, because a lot of people are wasting their money and their medicine with this route of administration. So what do we know about rectal delivery? Several different types of suppositories were tested by scientists in animal studies. This was in the 90s, and they found one that worked really well. It's called a hemisuccinate THC composition. When that seemed to have about double the bioavailability of swallowing the THC and taking it through the GI tract. There are some theoretic benefits to absorbing THC through the rectum. First of all, for anyone that can't absorb it through the mouth, that's the number one reason. I think a number 2 reason for some people is that the rectal blood vessels do not go directly to the liver, so you avoid what's called first pass liver metabolism, which changes THC into something called 11-hydroxy THC. So it's similar, a little different. Most people perceive the 11-hydroxy as more sedating, maybe more psychoactive, but others consider it more body active, where it's more of a muscle relaxant. It's a little bit longer acting, very good for sleep. And so for people that want to avoid that, rectal delivery may be an option. But I'll tell you this, I promise you, if you put THC in your rectum enough of it and you don't feel high at all, then it means you are not absorbing it, period. Everyone that wants to use THC in the rectum to avoid getting high is totally misguided, because you get enough THC in your bloodstream, you're going to have the psychoactive effects, whether it goes through the liver or not. And so if you're not feeling it, you're not absorbing it. And sadly, this is what a lot of people are doing, and they're wasting their medicine. Much better for you and totally equivalent to rectal absorption would be just putting it between your cheek and your gum. And you can absorb it through the blood vessels in your mouth. And I say that instead of under the tongue, because people aren't really good at holding things under their tongue. When it's here, you can kind of forget about it. When it's under the tongue, a lot of people swallow it. But under the tongue does have the best blood vessels for absorption. So, but oral, we call this oral mucosal absorption. It's dependable, it's consistent, you know what you're doing, and it's a lot, it's probably a lot easier and nicer than the rectal. So rectal would be great at end of life for people that can't tolerate things by mouth. It may have some other applications, especially if there's a rectal cancer or something that's right there that we're trying to treat. But please, for our listeners, stop wasting your medicine with rectal delivery. I know there's a lot of people that use cannabis to treat cancer, and they swear by it, and they say you can take grams of it per rectum and not get high, no side effects. There's no absorption if that's the case.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Thank you. One more question though. When I was taking the THC orally, of course it was too much for me, but is it common for people to feel the THC not only in the head, but also in your organs, like your stomach, your bladder, your liver? It's like you're swelling or something.
Everywhere.
Is that normal? People feel that, or is this me?
Well, it sounds like you had too much of it. I think at a dose that's comfortable, most people don't have this increased awareness of their body parts to the point where it's distracting or concerning, uncomfortable, disorienting. That's a sign that you've had too much. Now, for cancer, a lot of people have the strategy of, let's really crank the dose up. And you can absolutely do that. If you do it slowly and gradually, then, I've seen people that reach like 500 milligrams of THC in a single dose, but they were so methodical and gradual about the way they increased, they never got the side effect. And at 500 milligrams of THC, they are not getting high at all. And it's not because they're failing to absorb it. It's because they built tolerance to those psychoactive effects gradually. That's much different than suddenly putting, say, 100 milligrams of THC in the rectum and feeling nothing. And I do want to clarify that. People can absorb high doses of THC with no psychoactive side effects only if they've taken the time to build tolerance to those side effects.
I see. Okay, got it. All right. Well, thank you so much for answering my questions. I appreciate it.
Lisa,
you're welcome. Great
thank
one.
you. Great to see you too, and I appreciate your support and being here as well.
Thank you.
Have a great evening, huh?
You too. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you for that, Dustin. And Dustin, you want to talk about microdosing? Less is more, not only for cost, but also the medical benefits. You don't need to blast the body.
Yeah, I mean, it's so unusual what cannabis can do, right? I mean, as a clinician and even as a patient or an individual, you really have to set aside your assumptions about how medicines work when you approach this plant. It's full of surprises. One of the big surprises is that very often a lower dose of cannabis is more powerful than a higher dose, more powerful for symptom reduction, and also more powerful for shifting physiology in a meaningful way. So this is why, kind of what I was alluding to before, like when you see cannabis that was working that's no longer working, most people want to bump the dose up. They may get a temporary improvement in efficacy and then it stops working again. But if you reduce the dose instead of bumping it up, you can regain efficacy without building tolerance, and you can maintain that efficacy. I mean, when people are at their optimal dose of cannabis, you can stay there for decades without building any tolerance, without having to change your dose. It continues to work year after year. And so optimal dose is different for everyone. I can't tell you what your optimal dose is, but I can teach you how to find it for yourself. And that's exactly what I've been striving to do on healer.com.
Thank you for that. And let's take one for, since the topic tonight is anxiety, depression, insomnia. Question here is curious, should we all be using a CBD dominant 20-to-1 spray as a preventative at night?
No, I don't think so. Like I mentioned earlier, a lot of people that use CBD in the evening, they kind of feel awake and alert. They close their eyes and they go to sleep just fine. There's some people that CBD keeps awake. CBD can actually cause sleep disturbance in some people, and so that strategy would not really fit for me. If you wanted to use a very low dose of CBD as kind of a tonic or for preventative medicine, to me, it would make the most sense to do that in the morning.
Gotcha. And you just talked about keeping people awake. What about too much CBD? You know, a lot of people, hear that, CBD is in the news every day now. And they think, okay, it's non-psychoactive. I can take as much as I want, and I want to treat my anxiety. Have you worked with patients where it's induced anxiety?
Absolutely. Yes. Anxiety, what people would call dysphoria. I mean, kind of the opposite of what one of the effects of THC. Agitation. People tell me they feel jittery. They feel like they've had too much caffeine.
Yep.
CBD is incredibly safe. It's non-toxic. It's very well tolerated by a lot of people, but it does have side effects. And the concept that it's non-psychoactive is really paradoxical, because how could it treat anxiety if it didn't affect one's psyche? It absolutely can. So it's what we would call a dirty drug. CBD is doing lots of things in the brain, lots of different things in the body. It's hitting all these different receptor targets and enzyme targets. So that's what we mean by dirty drug. It's not like a single mechanism of action. Typically with dirty drugs, there's a high risk of side effects. CBD has mild side effects typically. They're rarely severe. But even though they're mild, they're still there, and people respond differently to it. So, yeah, it's not like a general assumption that everyone's going to love CBD. I've met lots of patients that don't, but they tend to like it a lot more when it's combined with THC, the way Mother Nature gave it to us.
You got it. I'm trying to get another one on here as we speak. Sorry, I am listening.
All right.
I am listening to you.
I know it, man.
Allison, I don't know if you are live. I'm trying to get your camera up here. I'm asking you to start your video. So I'll keep you up there for a second. So if you raise your hand, if you can have your videos ready. And Elaine, I'm going to try you next here. You're still awake, right, Dustin?
I am, man. This is fun.
I know.
I've actually got some charting to do tonight from the patients that I saw today. What a long, great day it's been.
Good. So again, I have two up there in holding patterns. So Elaine or Allison, I'm asking you to help you with get your video on. So let me see. This one's about dementia, and it says an anonymous attendee. So you spoke a little about using medical cannabis for dementia. My family and I are in New York and interested in exploring this for early dementia. Would you have any recommendations for us?
Yeah, absolutely. I see a lot of patients in Maine with dementia, more and more all the time. I am working with an assisted living facility where we have more than half the residents on cannabis right now, and it's going extremely well. It's true, most of the cases that I'm treating are kind of more severe. We're using cannabis to get them off of their benzodiazepines and antipsychotics and other anti-anxiety drugs, and to make life a lot better for them, and to help the nursing staff take better care of them, and it's working great. So your question about early dementia, what would I do for early dementia? I would do everything that I can to improve the health of the nervous system and to protect the nerves, cannabis and non-cannabis. But as I mentioned earlier, cannabis protects nerves from injury. So unlike traumatic brain injury or stroke, dementia is a slow, gradual brain injury. It could be caused by mini strokes, like a vascular dementia. It could be caused by what we consider Alzheimer's disease. There's other types of dementia, but this is a neurodegenerative disorder, a slow accumulation of like micro injuries to the nervous system. And as the nervous system tries to heal from that, it fails to restore itself to its original potential. And so, yes, cannabis has neuroprotective properties. There's been animal studies done in models of different types of dementia where cannabis has been shown to help. One recent one, you probably saw the headlines maybe 6 months ago, actually reversed the cognitive impairment in some of these dementia rodents, I believe it was. And so there's a strong basis for cannabis in early dementia, and I would really consider what types of neurotoxins one is exposed to. Mold toxins can be really hard on the brain. Chronic infections like Lyme disease is a really tough one for the brain, and highly associated with Alzheimer's disease. There's a number of things that you want to get out of your body and out of your environment, out of your life, to stop poisoning your brain. And then also what you can do to protect the brain. And cannabis is very high on my list, but it's far from the only one I would choose.